With me is David Mitchell, State Director for AARP in the state of Arizona. Thank you very much for making the time to join me in this important interview about AARP.
Well, David, it's my pleasure to be with you because I enjoy talking about AARP.
Great. I understand that you have been with AARP for 27 years, and I'm going to ask perhaps the last question first. Okay. Would you do this all over again?
Absolutely, without a doubt. This is a great place to work. It's a great place to serve because we have a great organization.
I would like to ask you, if you would, to give us a little history of AARP from its beginnings until the time you basically come on board with AARP.
Well, AARP came into existence in 1958. Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus was our founder back in 1958. And in 1960, just 2 years later, she started the very first AARP chapter that gave members of AARP an opportunity to gather together not only for fellowship, but also to learn and also to serve in their community as volunteers and be leaders in their communities, particularly in areas related to aging, related to legislation, related to things that affected people over the age of 50. And that was in 1960, and we in Arizona can claim chapter number 1. And 50 years later, chapter number 1 is still in existence, still serving its community, still producing leadership. And that's what makes it real exciting to be part of AARP. But that was back in 1960. A lot has happened over the last 50 years since that first chapter was founded. You'll notice that in 1965 was the year that Medicare came into existence. Now, Dr. Andrus had great influence when she was back in Washington, D.C. during that time in the beginning of Medicare. So in 1965, just 5 years after that first chapter was formed, you'll notice the influence of AARP chapters not only in Arizona but all across the country in legislative issues, and in particular the founding of Medicare. You move on a little bit further than that, and you'll see that AARP continued to grow. There were offices that were opening all over the country, actually. Dr. Andrus started in California. She eventually moved to Washington, D.C., where we had our national office. But then we began to open offices in various places around the country. When I came to AARP back in 1983, several things had already transpired that really motivated me in doing the kind of work that I do. One was the fact that, as I believe you understand, that Dr. Andrus not only founded AARP in 1958, but prior to that, 11 years prior to that, in 1947, she founded the National Retired Teachers Association. Now, up until the year 1982, there were two separate boards that actually directed the work of the individual organizations. In 1982, those two boards merged together, and one board was founded. And so that was just a year prior to my coming to AARP in 1983. And so AARP began to really evolve once that took place. As a matter of fact, what I found very interesting is back in as early as 1969, now this is 2 years after Dr. Andrus passed away, in 1969, our then executive director, Bernie Nash, was coming into a board meeting. And as he moved into the room to conduct the board meeting, he heard several members of the board in conversation. And one of the things that came up in that conversation was the fact, if I knew back when I was younger what I know now, I would have done things a little bit differently in my retirement. That caused a spark to come to Bernie Nash, and the board began to deliberate, this is as early as 1969, that we really need to reach some people while they're still working, before they retire. So 2 years later, in 1971, AARP formed a sister organization called Action for Independent Maturity. And that organization, Action for Independent Maturity, and we called it AIM, after its initials AIM, was designed to reach out to people 50 years of age, because at that point in time, one had to be 55 years of age to become a member of AARP. So when AIM was founded, it was designed to reach people between the ages of 50 and 65.
So does that mean then that there were two organizations pretty much running at the same time?
Actually, there were three.
Three?
Because there was AARP, there was NRTA, and there was AIM.
Was there a way in which AIM communicated with its members?
Well, indeed, we did have our own magazine. It was called Dynamic Years. Now, when Dr. Andrus first began putting together a magazine, it was called Dynamic Maturity. That eventually evolved into Modern Maturity. But when AIM came into existence, we went back to that name Dynamic, and we called our magazine Dynamic Years. And so Dynamic Years was a magazine that was designed for members of AIM. And incidentally, back then, back in the early 1980s, it was $5 a year to be a member of AARP. But guess what? It was $6 a year to be a member of AIM. And we gave them a separate magazine, and also provided a lot of information and materials on how to get yourself ready for retirement and what to do later on once you were retired.
What triggered the termination, if you will, of this organization, and what happened to the staff that was working for AIM?
Well, what was interesting was the board of directors back actually in the December 1984 board meeting made the decision to actually merge AIM back into AARP. One of the things that was going on during those mid-'80s was a mini recession, and companies were no longer paying for their employees to go through a retirement preparation program. And so the materials that we were preparing, companies were no longer buying these materials, not because they weren't good materials, but because of the fact that they were in a recession mode, and so they were cutting out a lot of extra expense. So what happened was back in 1984, at the end of the year, the board merged the two organizations and then developed a new program under the auspices of AARP called Workforce Programs. So we carried on a lot of the same responsibilities with retirement preparation material and also employment planning material, but it was under the auspices of AARP. So we dropped the name AIM.
Now, you used to work for AIM, and when I knew you, in 2003, you were a state director. How did that happen? What transpired? Can you talk to us about the structure of AARP from regional office that you said earlier to the structures that we currently have?
Yes, I'll tell you, and it was an exciting time actually, because one of the things that we always tell our AARP staff, if you don't like change, AARP is not the place for you, because AARP changes, and it changes with the times. That's one thing that is so wonderful about our organization, because we respond to the needs of our members. And back in 1986, that was the last edition of Dynamic Years. So we put that magazine to bed, And that is when modern maturity actually developed into a number of issues. They began to put articles in modern maturity that related to the pre-retiree as well as for the retiree. Because as the baby boomers began to age, and now think of it right now, the baby boom generation, they turned 50 in 1996. They are turning 65 next year in 2011. So as AIM was absorbed back into AARP, AARP began to develop with the baby boomers. And so you will find that as we got into the early 90s, and our membership really began to grow. When I came to AARP in 1983, we had 14 million members. Nowadays, we have between 38 and 40 million members. So you can see how we have grown over those years. And because of the fact that the baby boom generation, they are growing along with us. So what happened, David, was not only were the two organizations merged, but then we began to grow along with the needs and wants of that dynamic, that age group. And included in that age group was information they wanted not only on retirement planning and financial planning, but also they wanted information on how they could contribute to their community, how they could be effective in their communities. They like to volunteer. And you'll see that as we got into the 90s, now here's something that a lot of people don't realize. Back in the late 90s, actually it was in 1998, the board of directors actually dropped our name, American Association of Retired Persons. A lot of people don't realize that. We are just known by the four initials AARP.
How did we evolve from regional office to state offices?
As you know, Dr. Andrus, what she wanted was for AARP to be relevant to its members where they lived. And it was very important for us to get to our members where they lived. Now, originally, regional offices, as a matter of fact, prior to their being called regional offices, they were called area offices, and they were in cities of the 10 federal regions. But what happened was we began to realize we need to put staff into the states so that we could be better servants to our members. So as early as 1987 is when our first state office came into existence. That was in Pennsylvania. In Harrisburg, Pennsylvania in 1987, our first state office came into existence. Now, it wasn't until later on in 1992 and 1993 that we began to take on other state offices gradually. California, New York, Ohio became state offices. And then in 1995, we actually had an explosion of state offices, and we ended up at the end of 1995 with 21 state offices. And then we began to open other state offices until the year 2002, and at the end of 2002, we had 53 state offices. Now, I know we only have 50 states, but there's one in every state, plus we have an office in the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, giving us 53 state offices, accomplishing what Dr. Andrus set out to do, to get AARP relevant to its members so that we are in places where our members live.
David, but you missed an important state, Arizona.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I came to Arizona in 1995. I started out my career in Chicago with AARP, working in these workforce programs, working specifically with business and industry. We had a very successful program in the Midwest in relating to business and industry. I was asked in 1992 to come and bring that same program to the Intermountain West. And so in Salt Lake City, I moved in 1992 to Salt Lake City to develop the workforce programs in those 8 states in the Intermountain West. And 3 years after I went to Salt Lake City, AARP went through a major change, and I'm making reference now to opening those offices that we were talking about. And so out of our 10 area offices, 5 of them closed as area offices. We kept the 5 largest as regional offices, and then we began to open state offices. So I ended up going to Arizona in 1995 to open the Arizona state office, and I've been there ever since. But let me tell you, Arizona has had some very innovative practices, and we have developed some very good leadership for AARP in Arizona. As a matter of fact, my very first state president ended up being the national president of AARP. My next state president ended up being on the National Policy Council.
Would you mind sharing the names?
Sure. Eric Olson, Dr. Eric Olson was the national president. He was my first state president. I remember recruiting him and going to a restaurant, and you know, Eric used to tell me that it was the meal that actually got him to come to AARP, but I know that that's not true. And he was a very successful national president of AARP. He was followed by a gentleman by the name of Rich Stephen, and Rich Stephen is now on our National Policy Council. He was our Arizona state president for 6 years. And now our state president is Dr. Leonard Kirshner, and Dr. Kirshner, very well-known healthcare expert, asked to speak all over the country on issues of healthcare. He, at one time, was the director of the Arizona Medicaid program. So you know that we in Arizona have been very successful in recruiting high-caliber volunteers, and that's what is really moving our state forward.
Amazing story. David, would you mind sharing with us, you know, throughout the history of AARP, the ages, you know, the age requirements, and then the fees?
Oh, yes.
The dues to being a member. I think that's important to include in this interview.
Absolutely. Back when I came to AARP in 1983, as I mentioned, it was $5 to be an AARP member. It was $6 to be an AIM member. And then as we grew, and of course as the economy changed and expenses changed, and the cost of producing such a high quality, high caliber magazine and providing all the services and programs that AARP has to offer, we have had to increase our dues over the course of the years. Whereas today, it is $16 to be a member of AARP. You can get a reduction in that if you buy a membership that extends longer than the single year. But let me tell you, it is well worth every penny. The magazine itself is worth the $16.50, let alone all the goods and services that come with being an AARP member. And as I mentioned, it was 55 years of age that one had to be before they could join AARP. Now it's age 50, and nearly half of our members today are still in the workforce. So that's one of the reasons why we dropped the R word, retirement, from our name.
Another important point, I think, is AARP, we're not funded by the government. We're not, I mean, so I would like to ask you to explain to us, how do we fund our work?
A lot of people ask that question. We are a membership organization, and we are in business for our members. That's why we're there. Some people think we're an insurance company, And nothing could be further from the truth. We are not an insurance company. Dr. Andrus, when she founded the organization, wanted an opportunity for people to get health insurance later in life. And as a result of that, we have continued that all through the years. And we put that out for bid. And an insurance company has to provide a good product. They have to have a good reputation. And AARP puts it out for bid. And you'll find that there are many services that we provide our members, and this is one opportunity that AARP has. We are not the insurance company, but an insurance company does provide good service for our members, but we don't own them, and they don't own us. But here's the reality. As a result of policies that are sold to our members, AARP does receive an administrative allowance for those policies that are sold. And the money that AARP earns from that administrative allowance goes into our organization to help us represent our members. Also, there is funding as a result of advertising in our magazine. Now, keep in mind that AARP the magazine is the #1 magazine in circulation in the country, which means that we can command a healthy dollar for advertising in our magazine, and the money that AARP earns through advertising in our magazine goes right back into the community. It goes right back into services for our members in AARP. So our board of directors are all volunteers. They do not get paid. And so the money that goes into AARP is money that goes back into providing the community services that we offer as an organization. And when you think about the money that AARP earns during the course of the year, you can rest assured that it is poured back into the community, representing our members, not only in programs, but also legislatively. It gives us the opportunity to be there at the State House as well as in Congress, representing our members not only on federal issues, but in every state capital. You're going to find AARP members there lobbying on behalf of issues that affect people 50 years of age and over.
Communications. Would you share with us how communication has evolved? We understand that Modern Maturity was the initial name of the magazine, but communication with the AARP, with its members, has evolved tremendously.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, you'll find that AARP as an organization really keeps up with the times. I mean, we have gone digital. We are part of social media today. We communicate with our members certainly through the mail, but guess what? It's expensive to mail things, but we can reach a lot more people today on the internet. AARP has our own website, AARP.org, and you will find that our members can type in www.aarp.org, and they can get an absolute wealth of information on issues that affect them in their everyday life. So we communicate with our members through our website. And one of the programs that is highly effective in AARP is Create the Good. We've also created another website for our members called createthegood.org. And they can go on that website and find ways that they can serve their community. And so in addition to our bi-monthly magazine and our monthly AARP news bulletin, you can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on our website. And so we're using every means possible to communicate with our members. But guess what? In addition to all this technology and in addition to the written page, you can find us on television, you can find us on radio, and you know what? We still communicate face to face. Our members who love our organization tell their friends about us. So we have just about every means of communication to get our message across.
No doubt AARP exists to serve its members. I can just see from your sharing how AARP evolves to meet the rising needs. Can we now move to the subject of programs, efforts, campaigns? Could you kind of share with us what you have seen over the years, some of the programs, efforts, campaigns that AARP has engaged in?
Absolutely. And in keeping with Dr. Andrus' vision, one of the programs that we developed many years ago was a program called the Citizens Representation Program. And what that program was one that was designed to help people represent their age group in their community. In other words, we trained people to be on boards and commissions. And guess what? Even though that program by that name no longer exists, the principle is still there and we still apply it every day at AARP. One of the things that our members enjoy is the opportunity to volunteer with us as an organization. And one of the things that we do is provide training and information on how people can lobby their state legislature, how they can actually be lobbyists not only in their state, but they can call on their congressmen, they can call on their senators when they're in town. They can also represent their communities on the city council and different state organizations. So one of the things that AARP is very good at is providing opportunities for our members to represent themselves in critical bodies, whether it be in the State House or whether it be on community councils, city councils, so preparing them for legislative activity. We also have had programs like Health Advocacy Services, which really helps people understand health issues, how to live a healthy lifestyle as you're aging. Very important to our members, but also how to lobby for good health care. And that's one of the reasons that you found that just recently AARP lobbied on behalf of new health care legislation, and why we have a health care law today that allows people to get insurance without pre-existing conditions, how we are helping to close the donut hole in the Medicare Part D drug coverage, how we're providing opportunities for parents to keep their children on their health insurance until age 26 if they're not able to get insurance some other way. And so the principles that are found in the new healthcare law are principles that our members really wanted to see. And what's interesting is that AARP lobbies on issues, not on candidates or political parties. We are a nonpartisan organization. Now, we are not always treated that way. Sometimes you will find that people will try to lump us with a particular political party, and actually they do it with both political parties. As a matter of fact, I love the fact that a few years ago, our then executive director had 2 plaques on his wall in his office. One of them was a quote from a conservative Republican who made this statement in the Washington Post. He said this, he said, AARP is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Democratic Party. That was a quote by Senator Trent Lott from Mississippi, a very conservative Republican. So our then executive director had that quote from the newspaper framed and hung up on the wall in his office. Next to it, however, was another frame from another newspaper. This quotation was taken from the Los Angeles Times, and it was Representative Pete Stark, who was, of course, and is a Democrat in the House, And he made this statement in the Los Angeles Times. He said, AARP stands for always advocating for the Republican Party. And this is why our then executive director had those two plaques on his wall, because that's exactly really where we want to be. We lobby on issues. We do not lobby on party. We do not give any money to any candidates. We do not give any money to political parties. We lobby on issues that are important to our members, and health care has been an issue that we have been working on for decades. So in addition to health care, we're working on issues like economic security. That's why you're going to see us at the Capitol working on Social Security issues, making sure that Social Security remains strong and available to our members and our members' children and grandchildren for many years to come. Livable communities is also an issue that we work on, making those communities livable for people as they age, because our members want to age in place and they want to stay at home.
Briefly, David, the foundation.
Yes. The AARP Foundation is AARP's charitable arm, is a part of AARP where people can donate money and they can get an income tax deduction by contributing to the AARP Foundation. And the AARP Foundation is there to help particularly those that may be economically disadvantaged. And so we have programs like the Senior Community Service Employment Program, which is actually run by the Department of Labor, but AARP has a major portion of that Department of Labor funding in order to provide opportunities for people 55 years of age and over who are no more than 125% over the poverty level, helping to train them to find employment. AARP also has a work search program that is designed to help people do some analysis of their own selves so that they could find what type of work they are best suited for. And the AARP Foundation certainly helps these individuals get ready to find themselves in the workforce. We are also helping disadvantaged women, helping them get back into the workforce as well. The AARP Foundation is our charitable arm.
As we have seen from your sharing, AARP evolves to meet emergent needs.
Right.
Diversity in our days has taken a very important role. It's an important characteristic of our community. How is AARP reacting or meeting some of those needs for diverse, our diverse communities?
AARP wants to look like the nation looks, and our nation is a diverse nation. As a matter of fact, several years ago, we had what we called the Minority Affairs Initiative. That was really the beginning of AARP's recognition that we needed to meet the needs of all communities. And so AARP, even to this very day, so for many, many years, AARP has been very interested in our diverse communities. And so we have even today, and especially here in the state of Arizona, where we have such a significant portion of Hispanic Latinos, we have a Hispanic Latino initiative where we are reaching out specifically to that community. You're finding more and more of our publications being put in Spanish because we recognize that this is a wonderful part of our population. It is part of Arizona. It's part of who we are. And so this is why we are making a concerted effort to reach out to the Hispanic Latino community here in Arizona. And also we are reaching out to other minorities as well. We have a wonderful African American Black emphasis throughout the country. We are also going to be working on Asian communities, and you're finding that AARP is looking just like the nation looks. And so diversity is really part of everything we do. At one point in time, it was a program. It's no longer a program. It is who we are, and it is what we do.
One of the most important things I believe in AARP is the partnership of staff and volunteers.
Absolutely.
Would you share, about how important has volunteerism been to the success of AARP?
It is the success of AARP. Volunteers don't just contribute to the success of AARP, they are the success of AARP. And that started way back when Dr. Andrus founded the organization, because one of her desires was to see people giving back to their community. And so our board of directors have always been all volunteer. Our board of directors are not paid. And they give hours and hours and hours of their time to lead our organization. And the partnership that is seen at the national level is replicated in every state. Just like our executive director has a partner in our national president. So the national president of AARP is a volunteer, and that national president partners with our CEO. Now, I, as a state director, also have a partner, and my partner is our state president, who is a volunteer. And so at the very top level of every organization of AARP, there is that staff volunteer partnership. And it goes throughout our staff. The various associate state directors in our office also have volunteer partners that they work with. And also, all that we do at the legislature, it's all done by volunteers. We have a driver safety program where we're helping people hone their driving skills as they age. All of these instructors are volunteers. We have a fabulous tax aid program where we have literally thousands of volunteers who every year are helping our members and others in the community prepare their income taxes, and we do it free of charge. These are all volunteers. Every program and activity that we have in the community is led by volunteers. They are the success and lifeblood of AARP.
I will end the interview by asking you that after this many years that you've been involved with the AARP, what is your deepest impression about AARP in the life of the United States of America?
We are definitely a force to be reckoned with, for one thing, simply because of our size. But one of the things that AARP is doing for our country is really promoting the value of giving back to the community. That is the heart and soul of AARP. That is what motivated Dr. Andrus. And here we are, some 52 years later, promoting the exact same slogan that AARP has had, to serve and not to be served. This is how we're helping the United States of America, by promoting volunteerism, by being there at the state legislature and being there in Congress, making sure that the aging population is not forgotten, making sure that the aging population is recognized for who they are and the abilities that they bring and the contributions that they make, so that our country can be a great place to be, a great place to age, and a great place to serve.
David, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. It was my pleasure to be with you, David.